doubts that the Scripture was true, because I've never had those doubts, but to understand and to see all the things that I've been told, all the things I've heard, all the things I've read, literally unfolding is just amazing. It's an amazing time to be a Christian. And I know lots of people are saying, well, no, it's not, because we go through this, this, and this. But that's exactly why it's an amazing time to be a Christian. Because the Bible said that we will go through this, this, and this in the last days. And we are living in the last days. I firmly believe that. And I'm excited to see what God's got in store for His church. I'm excited to see what God's got in store for America, because there will be a great revival. I believe we're seeing the beginnings of it. I believe that if you look around, you see the miraculous beginning to happen. I think it's been happening for some time. And I just believe and firmly believe that there's about to be an outpouring of the Spirit in America like there never was. Because when we get to rock bottom, and in so many cases we have, as far as a country, as far as literally when you see the fabrics of the moral fabrics of society are literally being torn right in front of our faces. And the moral fabric of America that is just literally, they pull it string by string by string, and it begins to weaken and begin to weaken. You begin to see something that's beginning to happen. Because when people get to a place of desperation, if you will, there's always a place they're always going to turn back to, and that place is God. You know, when I was just getting out of high school, whenever the Y2K thing happened, and I remember everybody was freaking out and going to the stores and buying up canned goods and groceries and everything, and everybody was freaking out because our computers were going to mess up. Well, I've been in education now for 11 years. My computer messes up literally once a week. So Y2K is happening every day, if that's the case. But the way I look at it is this, is whenever all that happened, and then 9/11 happened, and we've seen an era of vulnerability in the United States, what was the first thing everybody did? The churches were packed on that Sunday, right? The churches were packed all over the place. People were coming and flooding into the altars because they just knew it was the end of time. This is what I have found interesting in my time in church. Lots of people in the world, they will tell you that God's not real. They will tell you that I'm not getting into all that Christianity stuff. I want to live life. But everybody knows that there's an end coming. When they start, when a paradigm shift happens in the world, people run to the altars. And I'm talking about people that have nothing that wouldn't darken the door of a church if you held a gun to their head. But they know, even atheists know that something is coming to an end. And our moral fabric and the moral ways that things have, I mean, guys, whenever I was growing up, I laughed at some of the things that I was raised on, because I look back at it and I think, you know, my Grandpa Bird, on my mom's side, he was also a preacher, but he was also a sergeant in the military in World War II. So I had the best of both worlds of discipline from him. But when I get to thinking about, he told me things like, idle hands is the devil's workshop. He quoted that scripture and like it was scripture. And it's a funny story. Whenever I was youth pastoring, before I went into full-time education, I was in my office, and my pastor, who I actually went to high school with, and we graduated together, and he was the senior pastor, and I was the youth pastor at Hope, Arkansas. And across the hallway from him from my office was his office. And we were sitting there one day, and he comes to me and he said, "John, can you find this scripture?" He said, "It was quoted to me all the time." And I said, "Well, yeah, I've got some of those too." And it was ironic that we were both looking. I was looking everywhere, through every concordance I had, everything I had on the table, looking for idle hands in the devil's workshop. And I thought, that scripture, it ain't in there. I can't find it. I sure was quoted that every day of my life, that idle hands was the devil's workshop. And let me tell you something. I understand the meaning of that now. He wasn't telling me it was scripture. He was just telling me if you sit around and do nothing, which we have a lot of people that today want to sit around and do nothing. If you do that, you're going to end up with a whole lot of time on your hands. And when humanity gets a lot of time on their hands, nothing good usually ever comes of it. That's why my grandpa said, you're going to make sure that you do something every day. And he used to tell me that, lots of things. And I was a lot of it was scared me to death. Thinking of things like whenever I was just a kid, my grandpa told me when I wore a pair of shorts to his house the first time, 9 years old, I had a pair of shorts on, and he looked at me and he said, boy, them short-legged breeches is going to send you straight to heaven. And I'm thinking, 9 years old, that's frightening. And I tell people lots of times the story of my grandfather, I'll tell this real quick and we'll get into the word, but my grandfather, he preached this message the week before. And it was, God's coming back at midnight. And he had this, I love that man. I still remember his illustration. He took a can full of screws and paper clips and things like that and dumped them out on the communion table in the front. Because a lot of churches that I grew up in, they had those communion tables in the front. He dumped them out there, and there was plastic stuff in there too. And he took this magnet that he found, I'll never forget it, and he used to sweep it over top of that. And it would pick up some of the screws, and he would pick up some of the paper clips, but it would leave the plastic stuff. And he would always say, God's coming back at midnight, and if you're not right with God, this is what's going to happen. And some of the stuff would get picked up, and he'd point to it. I'll never forget one night, it was a Friday, it was a Saturday morning, and I used to freak out at night. Sometimes I couldn't go to sleep until midnight. It'd be midnight, and it'd be 11:59, and I'm freaking out, thinking God's coming at midnight, and I had a bad thought in my head, because back then, if you had a thought, if you had fun, you were in trouble. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, oh no, I had a thought in my head, and God, I'm sorry. And anyway, I fell asleep one night before I had a chance to apologize to God, because that's what I thought I had to do every day, because I thought God was the mafia, and he was just waiting up there with a lightning rod in one hand and a hammer in the other, just waiting for me to mess up. And he literally, I'm sitting there freaking out at 11:59, and I fall asleep, and guess what? I wake up the next morning, and Mom and Dad aren't there. I was literally in terror. I go, and I see my mom, she didn't wake up without making the bed when I was a kid. Just not. This morning, there was no bed made up. There's no bed made up. There's no nothing. I had a bad thought last week. I'm freaking out. Because usually if my mom and dad were snoring at midnight and I could hear them, I knew I had 24 hours of grace because God was coming at midnight and that was just what was going to happen. And so anyway, I'll never forget this. I get on the phone, I'm crying, I'm in the living room, I'm confessing every thought I'd ever had. I'm 12 years old. I hadn't had a whole lot going on in my life, but I'm freaking out thinking, Grandpa was right. I played basketball and I'm going to hell for it. And I mean, literally everything. And so I get on the phone, I'm thinking, I'm going to call my grandma and grandpa. Because if grandma and grandpa are home, I know I'm good. Because if anybody's going to heaven, it's them. So I pick up the phone, I call that number, 968-5549, I still remember it. And pick it up, guess what? They ain't there either. And so I'm beginning to really stress out a little bit more. I'm starting to freak out, I'm starting to break out into cold sweats. I said, I got another one. I'm calling Aunt Charlotte. I called her, picked up, and I said, I can't remember that number, but picked up, called it. She wasn't there either. So I went into a literal nightmare. I am crying. I am on the ground. My face is puffy. I am in total disarray that I have lived 12 years of my life, and now I am bound for hell. Well, it was about 1 o'clock. No, about 12 o'clock, somewhere in that range. So it's around noon. I get a phone call. And I answer the phone, and I never hear, hello! And it was my mom. On the other end, they were over at Grandma's. That's where she calls from. And I said, "Where are you at?" I said, "Are you calling me from heaven?" I said, "This ain't even funny." Anyway, so I'm freaking out. I really thought she was calling me from heaven. I'm losing it. But they went yard selling that morning. The whole bunch of them. So now to this day, I hate yard sales because of that very reason. Because there's a tragedy in my life that they caused me because of that. Anyway, with that being said, I said all that to say this. Throughout my time in growing up in church, I was called a lot of things. And I saw a lot of things. And I was told a lot of things that I don't look at and say, "Well, hey, look, they tried to mislead me. They tried to do..." No. It's nothing like that. They were trying every way possible to make sure that we as young people, we didn't do the things that the world was calling us to do, because they knew that sin was abound. Now, I can't imagine what it is to be a young person today. Because today, it's so readily available, you can pick it up, you can go. I mean, sin is so readily available with these stupid little things that I have to, called cell phones. Called social media. I can't tell you the things that I have experienced in public education, or private education for that matter, as a coach, as a basketball coach, with players of mine that have done things on social media that just blows you away. You're like, I can't even imagine why you would even consider doing some of that garbage. But social media has turned into a weapon of evil. It can be a weapon for good. It really can. You can use Facebook and things like that, and Twitter and stuff like that, to send good messages, to really do some great things. But I'm talking about all that today because we're living in a generation right now where the desires of the heart, where all the things that we see in today's society, we are living in an all-time high of storms in our lives. It can be made from social media. And guys, as both a youth pastor and as a coach in public education or in private education, I have been a social media centerpiece in many times. It's been used negatively against me. They like to put my name out there about how dumb I am and all the stuff that I've done wrong and all this kind of stuff. But there's been storms and there's been trials in my life. And I know for a fact that there's been storms and there's been trials in your lives. Because in today, we are living in a generation, we're living in a time when storms in the church are at all-time high. And something that God has really shown me, and then today, sister, when I was listening to your Sunday school lesson, and you started talking about, in other words, but basically the same context of storms in our life, trials in our life, I knew that God had a reason for what I was speaking on today. So, if you will, if you'll turn with me to Mark chapter 6, verse 45 through 52, we're going to look at a very, very familiar passage of Scripture. You can look that up and you can see in Mark chapter 6, 45 through 52, you're seeing the account of Jesus walking on the water. You can also find the same account in Matthew 14, 22. You can also find the same account in John 6, 16. You see the same account on this day. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read out of Mark chapter chapter 6, verses 45 through 52. And it begins reading. And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side before unto Bethsaida. While he went away from the people, and when he had sent them away, he departed into the mountain to pray. And when evening was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea and was alone on the land, and he was alone on the land. And he saw them toiling and rowing, and the wind was contrary. I want you to mark that word. We're going to come back to that in a little while. That was, the wind was contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he cometh unto them, walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. Now, I want you to look at that. Would have passed them by. Now, we're going to come back to that as well. Would have passed them by. But in verse 49 it says, but when he saw them walking upon the sea, and supposed it that it had been a spirit, and cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and saith unto them, be of good cheer, it is I. What was he really saying there? Jesus was saying, don't worry about it, the I am is here. Be not afraid, he said. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind immediately ceased. And they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure and wonder, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. So let's look at that. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to pray, God, that you anoint this word. It is your word, not mine, Father. I pray that you use me, every gift and talent that you gave me on the day that I was born. I give them to you, sir. Lord, anoint me, touch me, lead me, God, to preach the word that you want to be spoken. God, this is not a word from me. This is a word from you. I'm just a willing vessel. Use me, sir. Possess me, sir. Raise me up today, Lord, to be able to preach your word. In Jesus' mighty name. And everybody in the house said, amen. Looking at this, I want to go through this exponentially, if you will, or expositively, if you will, and we're going to look at each verse independently. One thing that we all have common is, obviously, I said, we all go through storms, and Jesus himself was going through some at this moment in time. Jesus himself was going through a storm because there was a lot of things happening in Jesus' life at this moment. And there's a tendency to read this text and consider it all to be a physical feat of Jesus walking on the water. But Jesus walking on the water was not what this was about. There was so much more than Jesus just walking on the water that we're going to take a look at today. In verse 45, Jesus had just fed 5,000 people. Okay, he had just fed 5,000 with some loaves and some fish. We all know that story. So what we're looking at here is Jesus was over, and there was a ton of people. There was 5,000 plus people, because there was women and children. We've talked about that. There's lots of people that there was a lot of people on the hillside that day. And Jesus is speaking to them, and he is preaching to them. And he is teaching them, and he is going through all of the lessons. And sometimes Jesus would preach for up to 2 to 3 hours at a time. Now, we get frustrated sometimes in the church world because we're not out by 12:10, so because we can't get to the local diner. But when Jesus was preaching, Jesus would preach sometimes for 2 to 3 hours at a time. And people would be flooding around just to see and just to hear him preach. According to John's account, the people desired to make him king because he fed them. So Jesus is he is preaching, he is teaching, he had been preaching for quite a while. But then Peter and some of the other disciples in the account, they come to Jesus and they say, the people are hungry. And what does he say to them? Feed them. Is that how he says? They come to him and they say, the people are hungry. And he says, well, feed them. Well, he said, all we have is some loaves and fish. And Jesus, being a little frustrated with the disciples. Remember, the disciples were not at the end of their road in the journey of reaching the places with Jesus. The disciples were going through a learning process like each and every one of you and I go through every single day. Correct? Peter is my saving grace. I love everything about Peter because Peter lets me know I still got a chance. Because Peter's doing all kinds of stuff. Peter's cussing people out. He's chopping people's ears off. He's fighting all the time. Even one time they're up on the mountainside, and he's there with them, Jesus, and the Mount of Transfiguration. And here comes Moses. And what does he say? He says, "Oh, Jesus, turn yourself into one. Let me do it too." He's always getting the cart before the horse. will. Jesus is Peter is a very ambitious person. And he gets really frustrated when it don't go his way. Like in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the guards come in there, and Peter's a little bit of a scrapper, okay? You know, Peter's not one of these dudes that sits back and says, oh, no, if you break into my house, it's okay, I'll let you go. He's one of these dudes that you break into his house, he's going to shoot first and ask questions second. Because that's just the way Peter was, okay? I believe Peter enjoyed his Second Amendment rights, if you will. Peter would pull the sword out, and he was going to he would chop their ears off. And Jesus gets on to him. Jesus is always getting on to him. If you notice, every time you see Peter, so Peter with Andrew and these guys, they're in there, and they're coming over, and then I can see them over here in the corner, and they're probably like drawing straws and saying, oh, who's going to be the one to interrupt Jesus while he's preaching? And here they come, they draw, and got the short one. So I got to go out here and I got to interrupt Jesus while he's preaching. They go and they say, people are hungry. You know, you've been preaching for a little while. They're a little hungry. And he says, feed them. They don't feed them. So they bring all there is to bring. He tells them, go find what we have. Some loaves and fish. And he blesses it, breaks it. And he's able to feed 5,000 people. And then what I love is there's 12 baskets left over. Each disciple had a basket that was full to the brim. Because Jesus does not just bless us at the point of our needs. He blesses us way above and beyond our needs. He blesses us above and beyond anything that we could ever imagine or could ever want for. But I see this, and Jesus is sitting here, and he's just fed the 5,000, and he's a little frustrated with the disciples because they just interrupted him preaching. And I mean, he tells them, and I love this, and it's really in Matthew, you really see it, but he also says it here. Now, he don't say it in the account in John, but he says, straightway he constrained his disciples. Okay, that's a word that we miss sometimes, because what he was doing was, okay, dudes, get out of my face. Get up out of my grill for just a little while. Get your tails in the boat. Go over to Bethsaida. I'll be there in a minute. Because here's what's going on. Jesus has got a lot of problems at this point in time. In verse number 46, when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. Guys, after this, Jesus' problems at this point drove him to his knees. Barclay says, he points out the following things that Jesus had faced when he went up to the mountain to pray. The Orthodox Jews had become very hostile to him and desired to kill him. The intentions of Herod Antipas were of a very suspicious nature. Among those who followed him were the political hotheads of the time that would make Jesus king, who would lead a rebellion against Rome. Right? This is what's going on. Am I wrong? And Jesus' purposes were completely misunderstood. And there was a great press of needy people everywhere that Jesus went. They drew a great deal of strength from the physical body of Jesus. Jesus is guys, this was just a short time after the woman is pushing through people just to touch the hem of his garment. Jesus is very, believe it or not, I know we don't like to talk about it because we don't look at the human side and the human nature sometimes of God made flesh in Jesus Christ. But Jesus went through the same things that you and I go through on a daily basis. His thing was that he didn't fall into the temptations that many of us do. And so Jesus is on this earth and he is down here. And guess what? He's stressed. Jesus Christ of Nazareth is stressed. So he does what he would do. He goes up into the mountain to pray. Jesus makes prayer a very important part of his life. So what much more should we do that? If the Son of Man would go up into the mountain to pray because he's having some stress in his life, why is it that we as human beings want to handle our own problems? Come on somebody, you know I'm preaching. Because a lot of times when we get stressed, we want to go and we want to figure it out our own self. We want to figure out how we can do it. When Jesus is just saying, get in the boat and start going to Bethsaida. What he is telling them is, get in the boat. I didn't tell you to do anything else. He said, get in the boat and go. So they're in the boat and they're headed out. There's toiling and there's is rowing and the wind is contrary against them. Now, contrary wind. Now, growing up in I'm blessed because I got enough of the old ways of doing things that I completely understand. But yet I was raised enough of the other way to where there's a balance in my life. Because I'm kind of what I call a tweener, if you will. I got whippings for everything. And on this side, I was able to at least wear shorts. I might have took a beating for it, but at least I was able to do that. I wasn't bottled. And you know, and I have had the ruler against my hand by them glory knot sisters. I'm telling you, it's real. Most likely, and you ain't ever been embarrassed more than you ever be embarrassed until your mama grabs you by the ear and literally wants to rip it off the side of your head and take you out of church and spank you in the foyer. I would to God that we would do that some of these days. Come on, somebody. Working in public education, there's a few people who need a couple of those. That's right. I'm going to get off of that soapbox and step back on that. In verse number 47, most likely the disciples set sail about 5:30 p.m. Between sundown and darkness, they rowed for 9 hours. In the wee hours of the morning, were what they say on here, it was the fourth watch, which is somewhere around 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning was the fourth watch. And they are rowing across, and they're using their strength against the great force of the wind as it quickly arises in the lake. Yet they were only about halfway across the 5-mile stretch, and they were struggling. Remember, they didn't have an Evinrude or Yamaha or anything, or a 250 where they could just throw the key in there, drop the throttle, and put the hammer down across and get over there, you know, and fish in that spot for us to go. As they had to row or they had to sail, and time was a whole lot short, a whole lot longer when they had to do that. So anyway, in verse 48, Jesus was roused from his prayer time by the light of the moon, and he looked across the sea and he saw the boat. He knew immediately that he had to do something. So he left his prayer sanctuary and went down the mountain, and he promptly walked across the water. Now, I want to show you something that jumped out to me. Okay? This jumped out to me, and this hit me because I have heard this preached. I have read this I don't estimate how many times I've read this story. I've read books. One of my favorite books I ever read is a book called Why Drown When You Can Walk on Water. And I'm telling you, I've studied this, seen this, I've wrote papers about it, I mean, you name it. But I don't think I ever caught this until a few years back when he said, walking upon the sea. The Bible account in Mark and in Matthew, it doesn't say it it does not say it in John, but in Matthew and Mark it says it. He said it would have passed them by. Now, I stopped because I asked myself, why would Jesus, who is going out there, which I know they're screaming, they're crying, he hears their cries, he hears their hearts, they are in trouble, and he told them to go, and it's about 2:30 in the morning, they've been rowing for a while, they hadn't made a whole lot of progress. After 9 hours of rowing, why would Jesus go? Why would the Bible say that Jesus says he would have, or it says that Jesus would have passed them by? Because Jesus did not tell them, I would meet you on the boat. He said, I'll meet you on the other side by Bethsaida. Never one time did Jesus ever say, in any account that we ever see, never one time did he say, I will meet you on the other side. I will be in your boat and I will be there. Did he ever say that? He never said that. And this is what blew my mind when I was reading this. I flipped over to Matthew chapter 15, or chapter 14, verses 22 through 33, and same account. Same exact account. Now you read John, it's just a few verses. It's not very many verses about this, but I also noticed something different. In Mark and in John, you know there's never a mention of Peter walking on the water. It's only in Matthew. Matthew is the same account. This is right after they fed the 5,000. Only in the book of Matthew do you ever see where Peter's walking on water. And guys, I'm telling you, I've read it so many times. But it was a few years back, and I remember having a long conversation with my wife about it one day in the car after I'd seen this. I didn't understand. Why is it? Because then I started thinking about the Hebrews Faith Hall of Fame, right? You know what I'm talking about? In Hebrews, where you see in verse number, I think it's chapter 11, the chapter of the Hall of Fame of the greats. There's lots of accounts, including New Testament people, of great accounts of faith. But Peter isn't mentioned in walking on water. Why is he not mentioned yet? That would be a great account, right? But he's not mentioned. But I went back over, and so I started reading in Matthew chapter number 14, and this is what I saw. Now we're back to verse 24 where it said the wind was contrary. Now I was called contrarian by my grandmother a lot. You're contrarian, you little knothead. I was told I was contrary a lot. Contrary wind means something that is standing in your way. Something that's just a pest. Something that's pestering the life out of you. Remember, a contrarian wind, it's not saying that this is some big hurricane force thing. He's saying it's a contrarian wind. They are going this way. The wind is blowing this way, and they're not making any ground. For those of you who do a lot of fishing or a lot of time on a lake, if you had to put 2 oars in the water and you're rowing and the wind's blowing against you, it slows the process down, does it not? Because it creates waves it creates wakes against the front of your boat. I used to fish a lot of tournaments when I was growing up and in high school and everything, and I used to fish a lot. And I know some of the hardest days I ever had of fishing was when the wind was blowing against my boat, and I'm trying to hold with the trolling motor, trying to hold the front of the boat to where I could fish on the bank and do the things that I was trying to do. But it's hard when it's doing that, so I can't imagine. These guys are just putting a little arm power into it, putting some elbow grease into it. They're going against it, but I want to show you something that I think will help you. This contrary wind, so it's not like this is just over the top. It's just a contrary wind that's keeping them from moving forward. Now, I'm in Matthew now, okay? Matthew 14. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea, and the disciples saw them, and they were troubled, and they cried out in fear. Okay? Now, again, when you look over here at Mark, it says he would have passed them by. But then I look over here, and it just says that he's walking, and he said, but straightway Jesus spake to them. See, they're scared to death. They're freaking out. They see this man walking on water. As if any one of us would ever be would not be afraid if we saw somebody walking on water. I heard a guy say one time, this guy said, he came up to him and he said, well, you know, I'm God. And he says, well, come here to my house. He's come over to his house. He's wondering why. He said, why you invite me to your house? He said, I filled up my bathtub. He said, I got it to the very top of my bathtub, and I said, all right, dude, if you're God, start walking on that. If you start walking on that, I'll believe you. And so that's kind of the feeling here. I mean, if we see somebody walking on water, we're really going to be. They were afraid, but Jesus gives them a language, a voice that they recognize. He says, "It is I." Now, Peter, who I set up earlier, remember, Peter was always getting excited, always trying to get ahead of the game, if you will, right? Anybody disagree with that? Peter was always getting a little bit excited. Peter saw him, and he said, Peter answered to him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee. Now listen here. He's walking on the water. They just asked. They were just freaking out, and Jesus said to them, it is I. Is that not what he said right before that? He said, it is I. He said, the I am is here. But Peter, being Peter, who doesn't want to listen to what God says, but he wants to do his own thing sometimes, what does he say? Right after Jesus says, it is I, he says to him, literally in the next verse, Peter answered and said unto him, Lord, if it be thou. Jesus just told him, this is who I am. And then right after that, in the very next verse, Peter says, if it's you. When he was come out of the ship, he walked on the water to Jesus. Now watch this. But when he saw the wind turn boisterous. Okay? Now pay attention. We got a contrary wind that's keeping the boat from going fast across the water. But now there's a boisterous wind. What's boisterous? When I look this word up, it means as much as gale force winds. So the winds have just changed. The speed is up in the wind, and it's coming and blowing harder. And now Peter is standing out here, out of the comfort zone of the boat. He's let go of it. He's standing there. The wind is now boisterous. It's changed. There's change been introduced, and it goes from being contrary to boisterous, and now all of a sudden Peter freaks out. Peter had just asked Jesus, after Jesus had told him to do something. He had just said, "I'm here." He had just turned right around after that and said to him, "Is it you?" He said, "Yes, it is." So now Peter's like, "Oh, if it's you, let me come walk on the water." And he said, "All right, big boy, if you want to, come on." Because how many times have you ever been in your life when you stood on the verge of a miracle in your life, and you stood on the verge of something awesome, and you got the cart before the horse, if you will, and you got in a hurry, and you said, "Lord, let me go do this," and then you didn't wait on what you were told to do. You didn't wait till you heard from God. You just took off. And when you start taking off and you get out in that water and you're finding yourself alone, by yourself, when nothing else is there, then when things change on you, what happens? You freak out. Right? So he begins to freak out, and what's he say? He begins to sink. Is that not what it says? It said he walked on the water to Jesus, but he saw the wind was boisterous and became afraid. God does not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of peace, love, and what? Sound mind. He does not give you a spirit of fear, but all of a sudden he's out here on his own, and he gets afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, "Lord, save me." Somebody read that, verse 31. When did Jesus grab him? When? Immediately? So he didn't have to run over there and catch him, did he? He's walking on the water, and he's close enough to where as soon as he cries out, "Help me." As soon as he cries out, "Help me," Jesus immediately grabs him. So it wasn't like it was a period of time where he had to wait. It was the moment when he realized, "I can't do this on my own." And he got afraid because the boisterous wind changed on him. It went from something that was just pesky and contrary and keeping me from advancing to something now that is a danger to me. And now all of a sudden Jesus, who says, "I do not give you a spirit of fear," all of a sudden now he becomes afraid. And immediately when he cried out, immediately Jesus grabbed him and pulled him up. Now watch this. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, "Guys, how did I miss this? Oh, you of little faith." He called Peter a man of little faith. But he walked on water. What's this saying? When Jesus is on your side, miracles are just right around the corner. You can't do it on your own. But the minute you try, the minute you take your eyes off of him, now all of a sudden you realize that we ain't in a contrary wind no more. Now I'm out here standing on this cliff, and it's a little bit tougher than I thought. Now I'm out here on this island, and it's a little bit harder than I thought. But here's the thing. Jesus is waiting for you to say, "Save me." And he'll grab a hold of you immediately, and he'll pull you up. And what happens? He says, "Oh, you of little faith, where did thou doubt?" You were walking on water, dude. But see, you did it in the wrong mindset. A lot of us have started down the journey on God's path in the wrong mindset. A lot of us have begun that journey in the wrong mindset. We got the cart before the horse, if we will. We took off before we had all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. We wasn't ready yet, but God said, all right, listen, I'm going to show you need me. And He'll let you get so far out there, and then all of a sudden you realize, uh-oh, I'm weighing over my head here. And all of a sudden the wind begins to blow, and you get freaked out. But He says, I did not give you a spirit of fear. And He reaches down and grabs you right when you're at the point of your knees and pulls you right out of that water. And where did He take you? Did He walk you to the other side? Nope. He put him right back where He told him to be in the first place. Get back in the boat. They walked to the boat, and all of a sudden, when Jesus stepped in the boat, the wind stopped. The storms stopped. Because when you're in the place God wants you, there may be storms in your life. But the minute that God comes on the scene, He's bigger than the storms. He's bigger than, He's the God over the storms in your life. He's the God over the trials in your life. He is the all-sufficient one. He is the great I am. He is the lily of the valley. He's the sweet rose of Sharon. He is everything that He said He is. In the beginning He was. In the end He will be. He will reign forevermore. Because He is a God that is waiting for you to cry out unto Him and say, I need you, God. And when you cry out to Him, He's a God that will meet you right where you're at. When you are sick, He is your physician. When you have stress in your life, or you have things that you cannot come up against, He is your great psychologist. He can meet you right where you need to be. He is everything because He is everything to you and me. And that's where He is. And Peter saw that, and he walked back to the water, or walked off the water, hand in hand with Jesus. And they got back where Jesus said, and they finished their journey to the other side in the boat. Now, I'm not saying stepping out on faith is not important, because it is. Every step that you take in your life, ladies and gentlemen, is a step of faith. You have to let go sometimes. Sometimes you have to step out of your boat, because that boat is that comfort zone, and you're afraid to. So many of us in the Christian world especially, we don't want to let go of that safety of that boat. But when we start down the road, you better understand, when you start walking on the water, there better be more to you than just I'm going because I'm excited. You better go because you know God's leading you to do it. Because God will let you. He will let you go so far until you realize, I got to have you. Because that's where we learn. He didn't do it to punish Peter. He wasn't doing it to punish anyone. But you know what else is exciting about this? You know, there's 11 other people in the world who saw two of the greatest miracles that ever happened. 11 people who stayed in the boat saw two men walking on the water. 11 men saw the greatest miracle. We read the account of Matthew because he was one of them. And they saw two men. They saw the miracle of men walking on the water. They saw this. They saw what you can do when God is on your side. They saw what you're capable of. Why is it that we in the church world want to get into our cocoon, wrap ourselves up and say, oh, we don't want to stand up and say anything because glory to God, we just don't want to offend nobody because that's just not what, all poppycock. Stop all that. Stop all that. Step out every great once in a while and understand, when I start down this journey, I want to have God on my side, because God is the ultimate, what I like to call the ultimate corner coach. He's the one over there rubbing you on the shoulders when you're in that fight. When you're in that 12th round and the devil has beaten you and pounded on you for 11 rounds, but you're waiting for that haymaker to knock him silly. Or in good old Arkansas language, knock his block off. When you are waiting to do that and you have been fighting that fight and you are tired of him beating you down, you got him over in the corner saying, he's tired. You just got one more round, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to, pull the old Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope and get him over in the corner and let him swing for everything he's got. But then the minute that he gives you that opening, you're going to knock him where he belongs. Because that's what we're in. We're in an ultimate fight, an ultimate warfare. And every single day you walk out those doors, like they they said, like Sister Ward said when she was up here, you're a missionary. Every single day you walk out that door, you're in a fight. Make sure you got him on your side. Make sure he's walking right behind you, because he is the ultimate I am. If the musicians would come.